Hey YouTube, welcome back to Love for Crypto. It's a bit of a strange camera angle today, unfortunately, because my phone's about to die and I've got some shit that I need to speak about. So first things first, I'll make this as brief as possible. Listen, I fucked up on Twitter, yeah. I said something which, you know, I do regret. I wholeheartedly do deeply regret what I did say in the tweet. That was aimed towards Sam. But listen, hear me out, guys. You know, I deleted this tweet within minutes of actually tweeting it, because what I thought was a play in words, when I did look back at the tweet, I thought, hang on a second, this is going to rub people up the wrong way. And, you know, it was meaningless in what I was saying. You know, people who were saying I'm accusing Sam of being a paedophile. Listen, it's absolutely ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Listen, I know Sam's not a paedophile. In fact, actually, I've just watched Sam's our CKJ exposal video, and one thing I will tell you is he's actually gained a lot of respect on my part. Now listen, I know it doesn't go to say the same for Sam. You know, he's actually exposed me out in that video, unfortunately, and to a degree he has twisted it up a little bit. You know, I didn't know Sam was you know, trying to crack a case for, you know, a charity fraud on CKJ, and now that the evidence has been produced to me, I do feel a little bit silly about it, I won't deny. And I do want to, you know, apologise to anyone who I have offended. I know Sam didn't take kindly to my apologetic tweet on Twitter, so, you know, Sam, if you are listening, I do apologise. But listen, for me personally, I'm going to be the bigger man about this. I never meant that you was a paedophile by it. That's the reason why I brought it down 3 minutes after I posted it, because I thought, hang on a minute, this is the internet after all. People will read this in the most horrific way possible, and that's why I deleted it. So, you know, in regards to that, I don't really know what else to say. Can I just say one thing? Listen, Scott's putting out videos. People are commenting on Scott's videos about this. Listen, it's got nothing to do with Scott. He played no single part in it. It was my own bad judgment at the time. I'm not going to sit here kicking off, screaming, making a fuss about it, swearing about it, because listen, I did wrong. Look, listen, I'm human after all. I ain't used to this internet shit. And listen, you know, where I'm from in Manchester, we say all sorts of stuff to each other. I mean, on my bottom, on my arse, I've got written, tattooed on my arse, Dean's dead nana. Now people will be sat there thinking, oh my fucking god, what? And my friend Dean has got Kurt's dead mum tattooed on his arse. Listen, where we come from, the stuff that gets said would be so disregarded as vile and all sorts of other meanings that it feels wrong, and it is wrong. But listen, you know, the community where I come from, where I'm from Manchester, listen, you know, go and watch an Oasis documentary, you'll understand exactly where I'm coming from with that. But listen, I meant no harm by it. There was no malicious meaning to it. I never was pointing out Sam to be a paedophile, and I thought people are probably going to start thinking this, and I did delete the tweet around 3 minutes later on. So yeah, listen, I apologise to you, Sam. I apologise to the community, and listen, just can you please lay off Scott, because Scott's getting a bit upset about this. He's done nothing, and I feel, listen, maybe you deserve everything that I get, but I just hope people can understand that there was no intent to it, and it was a joke. Yeah, a poor selection of choice, which I'm fully aware of now at this point. But anyway, moving onwards, we're getting a bit into the video. I don't want to destroy all the time. But basically, for this economic outlook, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to absolutely love the stuff that I've got to say in this. Listen, I don't usually make a lot of videos these days. I've been very busy, as you can see. It's a glorious day here in England. I've actually drove past a lot of armed police. I think there is some sort of fucking police chase going on here at the moment. So I'm probably going to be introduced to this traffic for the next fucking 3 years. No, but moving forwards, listen, if you've been following the previous economic outlook videos, it will not come to any surprise to the vast majority of you all. I mean, especially if you're taking the stuff in that I'm telling you, absorbing it, doing your own research, to thoroughly understand exactly what I'm going on about, and to clarify that I'm not talking shit. Now listen, I think it was December, I made a video saying the Fed have lost complete control, and this is when the yield curve really started to become noticed to the people in the mainstream, and then all of a sudden, you know, we have had that Santa Claus rally, whatever you want to call it, and it's all been forgot about. Now, we were saying back then, you know, listen, this is the last rate cut, the last interest rate hike, sorry, this is the last one. And a lot of people did say to me, oh, you know, it'll be the end of the dollar, but you're on about, you don't know what you're talking about. Listen, I could see what was happening in the charts. I mean, you look at December when we had that 20% across the board sell-off in the traditional markets, especially in the US side. It was instantly the central bank stepped in and started accumulating those assets to bring up the valuations, or to blow air into the bubble, as some would say. And at that point there, you know, and from the research, the education, the people that I listened to, I made it completely crystal clear in my head that, you know, this is it now. You know, this is it. We are on that path now. Whether we like it or not, unfortunately, we are going down the path of utter, complete destruction. Now, the Federal Reserve this month, I've got a get-together, a little tea party, I like to call them. I'm just going to say it out right now. Expect an interest rate cut to the overnight Fed funds rate. And when I say this, I've got a feeling it's going to be 0.5, 50 basis points to a full percent, 100 basis point reduction to the current rates. Now, I mean, when I was first stating this in December, September even, in September, you know, it was all QT, we're tightening, you know, we're unwinding the balance sheets. And yeah, when it comes to December, it became very apparent that the Federal Reserve couldn't actually capitalise on what they were saying. They couldn't execute the plan. The unwinding, the interest rate hikes. Listen, the economy showing its true colours, and it was in absolute despair. You know, we talk about plunge protection teams, we're talking about the biggest, the 6 biggest banks in the US and the United States Treasury all getting together for a nice little group hub, you know, team talk. Listen, the economy, the perception that is shown on the mainstream media, it is absolute nonsense. You know, we're talking about the job breaks. And I've spoke about this very passionately in my previous one. You know, they're telling you about the lowest unemployment, and, you know, they're using the U3 number. And we've seen it today with the targets. You know, they were supposed to be 175,000 new jobs created this quarter. Or whatever the economic data came through, whether it's quarter, monthly, I don't know. But it was 27,000. You know, that is the worst in 9 fucking years. You know, this economic boom we keep going on about, that you keep reading in the mainstream media, in your tabloids, in your newspapers, it is a facade. Ladies and gentlemen, the sooner you realise this, the sooner you can understand the mechanics behind the market, the easier it will be for you to take. Now listen, we've got people on the TV, on the CNBC, all these types of channels, and listen, basically what they are doing is they are sugarcoating the entire thing. You know, we talk about inflation. Listen, the inflation figures that we are told are also a lie. And people say, but Kurt, you know, this is government figures we're speaking about. Ladies and gentlemen, honest to God, I mean, it's entirely up to you want to believe. Inflation is way, way past 2%. It's hidden in ways that you would not believe. When we're talking about, you know, the unemployment figures, you know, oh, 3%. Listen, it's around 17% unemployed. It really, really is. People who've got a 5-hour contract are down as employed. Now, okay, they may be employed, but that isn't enough to bring the bread and butter back to the table to feed the family and the little ones. It's fucking far beyond that. The figures are fist-fed, they're cherry-picked. The economy is on its arse. Listen, I've just come out in this video and I've just basically put it out there. I've said, listen, we're going to be getting an interest rate reduction. I've been saying this for a long fucking time now. It's finally becoming apparent in the mainstream media that they're actually talking about it a lot more. But let me just tell you another couple of things. The yield curve, the overnight rate, the overnight overnight rate yields more than a 10-year Treasury bond. A 10-year Treasury note yields less than the overnight Federal Reserve funds rate. Now listen, I know there's a lot of people out there that don't understand bonds, government bonds, Treasury notes and all this stuff. I'll put it in layman's terms for you. If you invest your money into a 3-month Treasury note, you yield X amount of returns. If you put your money into a 10-year Treasury bond, you yield X amount of returns. You know, you as an investor, you either got your money locked up for 3 months, you got it locked up for 10 years. Which would you say would give you the most in returns? If I put my money away for 10 years, I expect a better return than a fucking 3 month. I tell you that now. But listen, the distortions in the market, the magnitude of how serious the complications really are, that people do not seem to understand. Listen, there's all sorts of canisters of fuel surrounding this at the moment. You've got Deutsche Bank. Now listen, Deutsche Bank recently dipped below $5. Now this is a bank that was over $125 during the financial crisis. $125. It's now $5. Now, I thought fucking crypto was bad, ladies and gentlemen. When I bought into XRP, it was at 20 cents. It went up to 3.80. I thought I'm in the fucking money. And then it went right back down to 25 cents. And I thought, Jesus Christ, I better buy some fucking more. It's cheap as fuck. The difference is people aren't doing that with Deutsche Bank. But another thing is Deutsche Bank has to be protected. If a lot of you don't understand how the derivative market works, I mean, a derivative, first of all, is something that derives its value from an underlying asset. So you've got gold. So let's pick some derivatives of gold. It's paper, it's contracts, it's literally nothing. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not that it's not nothing. You know, we talk about ETFs, we talk about futures, we talk about all these things that create liquidity into the markets, that can give out fair valuation of assets. But on the same note, you know, these worthless pieces of paper can be dumped into the market to suppress assets. Exactly the same way that we see with silver and gold. You know, we're talking about asset suppression. That's a prime example. You know, you throw a shit ton of ETFs on top of that and sell them, the physical spot price of gold goes down. But at the same time, you know, we've got record-breaking purchases of physical gold by central banks. I mean, can anyone see the distortion there? We've got suppression in the gold market, suppression in the silver market. We've got central banks bidding up gold, physical gold, may I add, not the ETFs, the paper derivative markets, the physical asset, at record fucking accumulation. Why would they be doing that? Listen, there's talks about going on to the gold standard. You know, whether that happens or not, you know, it's very plausible. In fact, it's probably probable. Whether it does happen or not, I don't know. Christine Lagarde yesterday mentioned that she doesn't really see going back to a gold standard of such, but that's just Christine Lagarde's opinion. I mean, moving onwards, we've got Brexit. I mean, Brexit, you know, I don't like to bring a political state into this, but listen, I am a die-hard Brexit supporter. And it's not about leaving the EU, it's not about immigration, it's not about none of those things that you will hear from the BBC, you know, the left-wing establishment BBC. I sincerely realised that we have no voice no more in this country. In the UK, we voted to leave. And I'll admit, I did not take part of that democratic vote. For me, it didn't bother to me whether we left or whether we remained. But what does bother me is when we do decide to leave and we have a parliament full of remainers that will not push the deal over the table, over the line, should I say. Now that is completely undermining the democracy that we live in here in the UK. You know, we voted to leave. Why haven't left? Now I understand its implications, but we was also told we would leave on WTO terms in May. Then it was fucking June. Then it's October. Listen, there's nothing wrong. You know, 80% of the world trade on WTO terms. We can go out, we can create our own new trade deals with other nations around the world which have not been able to. The matter of the fact is, listen, on October, Theresa May's resigned because she's failed to do what she's been able to do, which is get us out of the UK, out of the EU. So what I am going to say to you now is October, if we do leave without a deal on WTO terms, you may as well boot that can of gasoline over now and just fucking light the cunt on fire. You've got Deutsche Bank, which is, you know, I mean, I don't even want to go there with Deutsche Bank, you know, its connections. If Deutsche Bank falls, and like I say with the derivative products, you have derivatives derived of underlying assets. So you could have, you know, let's say mortgage bonds, and you could have a derivative of those mortgage bonds. But then you could also have a derivative of that derivative, which is the derivative of the mortgage bond. But then also, you could have a derivative of that derivative which is the derivative of the mortgage bond. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like a set of dominoes. Once one falls, oh, motherfucker, you better believe those waves are coming to you. Now listen, Deutsche Bank's connections with other global banks around the world is phenomenal. I think Deutsche Bank has the largest balance sheet of derivatives on its record, and we are talking about interconnectedness with major banks around the world. Deutsche Bank must not fall, but will it fall? It's a question that we all need to ask ourselves. Listen, we've got the Federal Reserve that will, listen, in my opinion, and that's all that it is my opinion, will be dropping rates this month, yes, ladies and gentlemen, this month, June, by around 50 basis points to 100 basis points. And listen, if they don't, I'll be shocked, because they're pulling out the fucking stops right now in the markets. You know, stuff's getting really heated up in the markets. I've been listening to a lot of Peter Schiff, a lot of fucking Greg Manarino, Lynette Zhang from ITM Trading, GPS Money. They're my four favourite go-to economics. You know, it's the real truth, the real figures, none of the BS that you fist-fed through the state media. And it's not looking good at all. If we see an interest rate cut, we will see another one in September. And ladies and gentlemen, if you've been watching this channel for a long time, which I know a lot of you have, I have said for a very long time, Q4 2019 to Q2 2020, oh, it's when the baby starts. And listen, you know, we're right on cue, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, I'm not no guru, I'm not no fucking mass magician, I ain't no Mystic Meg, I can't tell the future. I just understand when I'm presented with documented facts, certain, you know, inputs, opinions on things, it's easy to quite understand exactly where we are in the world today. We're going to be seeing QE. Now, what I said about this, especially in my documentaries, you know, at least in 2008, we was at 6-7% interest rates. We had something that we could pull back. We're barely over 2% at the moment. And what we're introducing QE4. And not to mention, listen, we had QE1, QE2, and QE3. QE4 will be more than all three combined together to keep the stocks elevated. And this is what it's all about for President Trump. It's about making sure he gets that second term in the White House. And if this falls down on his watch, the Democrats will have a field day with it. An absolute field day with it. Now, the Federal Reserve, you know, it's amazing, isn't it, really? You know, since we had the US Treasury and the six major banks, well, let's not forget these six major banks are the ones that created the Federal Reserve. You know, let's have it right. You know, ever since then, you know, Chairman Powell's just done a complete 180 on his outlook, on his tightening policy, and he's basically come out and done a completely 100% U-turn, and now they're talking about saying we will use anything we can to keep stocks going higher. Now listen, you know, they call it the free market. You know, the valuation of assets should be determined by the free market to determine fair value. There is no fair value when the Federal Reserve are the main buyers of the stock market. And let's not forget, stock buybacks are also a major buyer of the market. I mean, what free market do we have that's not allowed to deflate? Is a good way of putting it. He's coming up to a really, really interesting time. I mean, a lot of people don't understand to seem to think, the actual consequences of this QE4. You know, if we do, and ladies and gentlemen, we will be going to 0% interest rates in the very near future. And listen, negative interest rates, don't write it off the table. It's very, very possible that, negative interest rates are coming. And don't forget, that's you paying the bank towards your money in the bank. It's a strange little disorientated reality that we live in today. Once interest rates go to zero and the Federal Reserve have to keep printing and printing and printing and printing to keep the stocks elevated, we are going to see that one-way inflation. And listen, people seem to think that hyperinflation cannot exist in the United States. It won't happen. I can assure you inflation rates are already way, way, way beyond what you will think that they are. It's actually chilling. The knowledge that I've been able to obtain over the past, 2 years since I've been actually studying economics, the way that I have been doing, to the magnitude that I have been doing, should I rather say. The closer that it gets, the more that I actually do start to get worried about what is going to happen, because we are going to see a run on the bond market. In 2008, people believed that the Federal Reserve could pull it off, and they went into the bond. And we can see it now. We can see people using the bond market as a safe haven. And what they're actually doing is, the reason that bond rates are being suppressed is because you've got buyers coming into the bond market. So it's a bit weird, really, for people who don't understand how this works. As capital comes into the bond market, rates drop. As cash comes out of the bond market, rates increase. I mean, it's fairly simple to understand, really. If people are leaving government stocks, bonds, the Treasury note from the Federal Reserve, people are leaving them. Interest rates need to go up to be able to try and tempt capital to flow back in there. Depositories. And what we're going to see this time round, ladies and gentlemen, when we do start going into QE4 and we do get 0% interest rates, and those printing presses are fucking burning, motors are burning on the bastards, because they literally chop, 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 bamming fucking cash out like you wouldn't believe. And listen, that's just a metaphor, it's probably a digital fucking printing, on the computer screen. But the difference is this time we will see a run on the dollar, we will see a run on the bond markets, and we can actually already see it now. As the 10-year Treasury note is actually coming down, the 30 is increasing. So the interest rates on the 10 are dropping, but on the 30-year yield they're increasing. So what that basically tells you is that gap's now widening. At the back end of the curve is widening. That's people getting out of that 30-year Treasury yield. That's people leaving the bond market before QE4's even started. Now, yeah, it's okay when you're in your 3 month and your 1 year, your 2 year, your 3 year, your 5 year. It's absolutely fine. But the difference is people have got it right. They rush into bonds for cover. Apart from this time, it's going to be a hell of a lot different. Because what you're going to see is you're going to see a run on the United States dollar. People are going to realise that, hang on a second, so we've got 0% interest rates. And here's another fascinating fact for you. Another absolutely fascinating fact. Since 2015, since the Federal Reserve have been increasing interest rates, there was that, maybe like 0.25, 0.5, and now they're at like 2.25. Yeah, you go and look at your savings account, because I know over here in the UK, and our monetary policy falls directly in line with the US. Our overnight funds rate is pretty much identical to the Federal Reserve. But they never give it back to the savers. Interest rates have been going up since 2015. The Federal Reserve are yielding more on their notes, on their capital, but the savers still stuck on 0.75. So we've had all these rate increases, yet your savings account is stuck exactly where it was. It's literally wealth extraction on a criminal level. Literally on a criminal level when I say this. I mean, as I was continuing to say, you've got 0% interest rates. You've got, I'm not going to call it hyperinflation, but let's call it inflation. we've got to be way. I mean, official numbers say, you know, we're just below 2%. Listen, it's a load of bollocks that as well within itself. But let's just use those official, you know, structures, the statistics that we do have. What do you think is going to happen when it's at 0% interest rates? You know, capital is being forced back into the stock market because you've got to beat the inflation rate. But, you know, when the inflation rate is at what, 3, 4, 5%? And that's been nice. It's already way above that now, but you will never know that. What do you think people are going to do with the Treasury notes? So, you know, currently at the moment, what? You've got the 10-year yielding, what, 2.1%? Just above, you know, the inflation targets currently as we are at this moment in time. I mean, what do you think is going to happen when inflation's at 3, 4, 5%? And then you've got the Treasury note that's yielding 2%. You may as well just be giving your money to the central bank. Now, people who've got money, big institutional investors, are not stupid. They are very smart, cunning, deceitful people. They will run from the dollar as fast as they fucking can. And then what you will start seeing with the US Treasury bonds, you will start seeing spikes to the upside as investors are fleeing out of the dollar. You will see the actual dollar index value plummet in ways you will not believe it. You know, I'm talking about the prices of cigarettes, of groceries going up by the day. You know, people see it in Venezuela, you know, they got like, what, 3 million% inflation. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the US is on, I'm not going to call it the same similar path. I don't think it'll ever get to that extreme. Don't write it off. Do not write it off, because it's simple what's going to happen. There's going to be a run on the dollar. I've been saying this for fucking God knows how long. The dollar will be fucking fled faster than you could even imagine. We're going to have a rate cut this month, ladies and gentlemen. We will be following up in September by a further rate cut, because in this rate cut, when you drop it by 50 basis points or 100 basis points, it simply will not cut it. It will give a temporary stimulus to the economy, and then that'll be it. And then we're going to go down to zero, all the way to zero, and we're going to get that same stimulus again as the central banks are adding back to its balance sheet. You know, the so-called unwinding. I think it was at 4.5 trillion was the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. They managed to get it to 3.8 trillion, and that's as far as they could go. They could only get it to 2.25% interest rates on the overnight funds rate, and that's as far as they could go. We've seen what happened to the financial markets in December. They were stripping 20%, 30% across the board. The plunge protection team stepped in. Federal Reserve completely changed the tone on the fiscal policies, the tightening policies, the QT. It's dead. I said it was fucking dead, and people laughed at me. I really don't know what to say moving forward with this now, ladies and gentlemen. We will be seeing the QE. We will be seeing the 2%, the two interest rate deductions in June and in September. I can promise you right now, we will be seeing them, because the stock market is desperate for its injection of crack. And when I say crack, I mean cheap, easy fucking money. You know, keep it rolling, keep it going. I mean, my only concern is, can Donald Trump really keep these markets suspended till he's elected? Or is it going to implode on his watch? It's a very difficult one to look between there. Obviously, you've got the trade tensions as well across the world. You've got the tariffs. There's all sorts of geopolitical events occurring worldwide. They're all lined up like a set of dominoes, and one's just waiting for one to go. I mean, the ECB, they're in negative interest rates. And they've come out today saying that they may go even further into the negative. No, we're talking about buying a European Central Bank bond and paying them to own it. I mean, ladies and fucking gentlemen, what reality are we fucking living in this day and age? It is beyond me. I mean, listen, hey, I'm not trying to say I'm no fucking expert here, but listen, the truth cannot be hidden for much longer. Listen, they've kicked the can down the road and down the road, and I think when the Fed do initiate that, the QE, you will see the initial surge in the markets. The markets are like, yes, the drug dealer's back, and everyone will be jumping up and down. Oh, we're fine. Oh, don't worry about the interest rates and inflation. Oh, there is no inflation. Ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what's going on here. The central bank, I believe it, they're working in tandem with each other. It's not just the Federal Reserve, world central banks together. You know, the G20 formed the summits from the crisis, and it will continue gathering around these crises. Oh, this time we've got digital distributed ledger technology. It's top of the agenda, and people who've watched my channel, we know that there is a big correlation between the digital asset space and, of course, you know, the financial markets. I mean, for myself personally, one thing people need to understand and to be able to grasp is when we have these financial crises, the ones who are punished the most are the emerging markets. They are the Argentinas, they are the Turkeys, the Venezuelas, the Mexicos, the emerging markets. You know, the dollar, the euro, the pound sterling, you know, all these major currencies coming from their, you know, from their economic structure that they've already got. They're solid economies. Well, I know, we say solid economies, don't we? But, you know, that'd just be a load of fucking bollocks. But the point is, what I'm trying to say is these countries around the world, emerging market countries, you know, for example, Argentina, Turkey, all these other countries that have got failed domestic currencies. And when the domestic currency fails, they then adopt the US dollar. And this has happened over and over and over again. And it goes to actually to say in this regard, and when I say this, listen, I do not say this kind-heartedly whatsoever. Those countries that are currently dependent on the US dollar, as the value of the dollar is being stripped away from them, so is their purchasing power. As if it wasn't already hard enough for them, their liquidity will just be diminished. You know, when we're talking about actually banks borrowing to banks, you know, the credit cycle, you know, the credit markets was froze in 2008. When they freeze again this time, central banks no longer have any stimulus. You know, they will try and pretend they do. They may go negative, but how long is that going to... The stimulus has gone. We are at the end, the back end of a cycle. And when I do say that, I'm talking about 1971, when the petrodollar standard was introduced, when the gold standard was taken away. That was the new cycle. Interest rates was that high, and every crisis we've had since then, interest rates have been deducted to cope with that crisis, to inject stimulus back into the economy. The economy recovered, and then we have another crisis. Interest rates were dropped, and we've gone from around 17% in interest rate. I mean, I think it was 27% originally in 1971. We've gone from those interest rates, which was extremely high at that time. That was the entire purpose why we had to fall onto the petrodollar status. But ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of a financial monetary cycle. Now, as I said, I'm no Mystic Meg. I cannot tell the future. I can tell you one thing. The central banks have got their backs up against the wall like a rat in the alley. They really have. The stimulus, the tools, they have run out of options. Listen, at 7% interest rates in the financial crisis, 2008, you know, the Great Recession, and, you know, we had to go down to zero. We've lifted them to what? 2.25%. And the markets are imploding with it. They need their fucking fix. And that's exactly what the Federal Reserve is going to do to them, because there is no other way, unfortunately. You know, we're going to be seeing these 0% interest rates. We're going to be seeing it. We're going to be seeing the inflation, and it is going to be... It's going to happen very fast. I think a lot of people, the citizens of the United States, do not understand the implications of exactly what is going to happen in regards to that. But I mean, in regards to the emerging markets, they're going to have no liquidity. The credit markets are going to be frozen. How do they then go about their everyday lives? You know, in regards to trade setups and you know, other associated facts that bring in, you know, exports, imports within the economy. You know, the world is run off credit. It's as simple as that. And we are about to experience the biggest cloud of fucking debt come pouring down on the world. There's only so much air you can blow into a bubble until the bubble eventually pops. And the Federal Reserve have attempted to try and in fact, they were successful in reinflating the bubble. Only this time, we will see the run on the dollar, and its world reserve status will be up for question. The volatility in the dollar will make it near impossible for stability in areas of trade and commerce, in regards of the valuation of money moving around the world, borrowing, lending, sending, settlements, derivatives. I mean, commodities are priced in gold, in US dollars. Commodities, gold are priced. Gold, you know, honestly, I watch a lot of gold bugs, and it would be a fantastic idea for people out there to invest into gold and silver. I mean, for myself personally, I'm not going to do it. I mean, listen, I'm taking a gamble. We're all taking a gamble here. We've heard Chris Larsen come out and say it, ladies and gentlemen. The world is not ready for another financial crisis. Assets like XRP can help restore the liquidity in the world when the world is illiquid. And when I say this, again, it's all about the credit markets freezing. There's just so many contributing factors, but it's the emerging markets that Ripple are heavily focused on. It's the emerging markets that are being set up as we speak today, with payment flows coming in and out. The US, the European markets, the pound sterling markets can take care after themselves, but the emerging markets can't. They will be penalised. And again, it's not me who's coming out saying this ludicrous, ladies and gentlemen. We've got Chris Larsen basically coming out. XRP can be the saviour of the next financial crisis. It's digital assets like XRP that can provide that true value liquidity needed, the true store of value, the true unit of account. It sounds far-fetched, ladies and gentlemen. And you know what, when I first stumbled across these findings, and you know, this is the line that I went down, my thought process. Hey, listen, it sounded crazy to me. But do you know what was even crazier for myself? Somebody who's only been here for 2 years, who's been educating himself for 2 years, and nobody to the financial markets who didn't even know what the Federal Reserve was 2 years ago. Do you know what I found crazy? Hearing Christine Lagarde, the head of the fucking IMF, getting up on stage, dropping the fucking R-bomb. Ripple, DLT, Ripple, liquidity. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, Brad Garlinghouse was, I don't know where, he was in Switzerland. We're talking major central banks. We're talking the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF. You know, these are the fucking fat cats of the fucking world, ladies. We're talking about the central banks, you know. And listen, we're talking about the banks that create the fiscal policies for its own domestic purposes. You know, the Bank of England will fucking govern the interest rates for then commercial banks to adopt, and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up to an extraordinary interesting time. We will be seeing the stimulus from the central banks. There is no two ways about it at this time. The market is needing the stimulus. And it will be short-lived stimulus. In September, they'll drop them again, and it'll be short-lived. Can Trump push this out to the re-elections? Who knows? Who knows? But one thing is for certain, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to see the world reserve status of the US dollar severely undermined moving forward. Now, this isn't me saying XRP is going to become the US dollar or the world reserve. This is me saying that we have serious fucking tectonic plate movements across the fucking world now in the financial landscape. You know, we've got Russia and China teaming up. And there's a lot of stuff, information that I've actually revised, which has led myself to believe that China may act as a part-time economic engine when we are seeing the downfall. I mean, listen, it's the end of an empire. the fall of an empire. And you know, I'm not poking fun at people when they say this. You know, I'm not trying to say, oh, you know, whatever. Disregard that. It's not about that. It's about being able to prepare yourself. You know, like I say, very challenging times coming forward. It's